Hey everyone, it's Jerry's and welcome back. It is that time of the month again. We are going to be doing our bullet journal setup for June 2022. June is halfway through the year. It is also summertime and the weather is hot and humid from where I am. So for this month's theme, I thought of doing a summer activity which is road trip. I also happen to be traveling locally at this point when the video goes live. Some of you guys might have summer plans too, so I hope this theme gives you inspiration for your own bullet journal or travel themed spreads you might want to create in the future. So let's get to what I'm painting for my cover page. I looked up for some road trip photographies online and I wanted something that conveys excitement and joy in this adventure. I combined several photos for this composition. Here I am painting a girl outstretching and seated on the car window. I'm using gouache paints by the way, and you can find all the supplies, links, and discount codes in the description box as always. Lately, I've been enjoying scenic paintings and practicing characters or people with this medium, and it's definitely a comfortable one to use personally since I can layer it if I make a mistake. I know this is not perfect by any means, but I will keep practicing until I find the style that I really like. I painted the base layer of the girl. As you can see, I decided to use yellow ochre for the shirt and blue for the denim pants, dark brown for her braided brunette hair, and then black sunglasses. I unknowingly moved on to paint the car afterwards without the details like shadows and highlights, but we will come back to that later on. Now I'm painting a side view of the car with black and white. Painting the first layer was easy, but when I got to the details, I was figuring out where I should paint the highlights and shadows since I wanted this painting to be semi-realistic. So it took quite some time in real life. I was also constantly looking at my reference pictures to somehow achieve that. But in the end, I am pretty happy with how the car looks. If you haven't tried painting with gouache yet, I recommend trying it out in the future. They are so fun to use since they are versatile. As I said, you can easily paint over mistakes and it's more forgiving than watercolor. Now let's go back to finish the details on the girl. We're just gonna add shadows or folds to the yellow shirt. I also noticed that I painted her skin quite yellowish, so I layered it with a bit of white and then added the shadows respectively. I completely forgot about the hair tie that I drew on her wrist, but I just added that in the end as well. Using my small detailed brush, I painted some darker strands to the hair and highlights too. I'm just developing strokes that form the direction of the hair. This is the only way I could think of painting hair with gouache so far, but I will for sure experiment different styles soon. Next, we are painting the road. I mixed a bit of Persian blue and white. I mixed it beforehand, so it kind of dried while I was painting the girl, and that is also something I noticed about gouache. It's that the consistency kind of changes a bit when reactivating a dried paint compared to when you apply paint that is fresh or right out of the tube. This can be a pro or a con, but it depends on the effect that you are trying to achieve. Let's move on to the background. I painted the sky with blue and yellow and blended them towards the center. I wanted it to look like a late afternoon, so I think we're able to achieve that. I also initially thought of doing a desert road trip, but since this idea is inspired by my personal trip, I went for a tropical vibe instead because I live in a tropical country. So on this background, there are mountains, lake, coconut trees, and more greeneries around. I worked on the coconut trees first. I painted the trunk with warm gray and added dark brown to the right side for dimension. I also made teeny tiny strokes for the details. Then I outlined how many branches there will be for each tree, and I went on with my small detailed brush again to paint thin leaves. I started from the branch and just draw short lines outwards. I'm layering the branches with lighter shades of green to add highlights, and then I added some more shadowed branches behind. The mountains I painted though looked like huge bushes. I used 3 shades of green as well, and since our light source is on the left side, the lightest shade is on the left too. I also used tapping movements with my small round brush to layer them. Then I'm just doing the rest of the greeneries here, and that will finish this whole painting. Let's remove the washi tapes and complete this cover page with the June title on top of the mountains. I'm using a white gel pen to outline the letters and then fill them in with my white gouache paint. I added a bit of shadows to the letters using my .003 black pigment micron, and one last touch is this yellow frame using the fine tip of my Tombow brush pen. I usually create a quote page on the left side of this cover spread, but I'm changing things up a bit this month, so I decided to do the monthly calendar here. The layout is very simple. I drew the grid with a thicker micron and I left all the sides open and then wrote the dates on the top right corners. I also combined the weekends here and added round yellow backgrounds to the dates. On the top left, I wrote June again with the same kind of font but with black pen and hollowed style lettering. Below the calendar is for some important notes. I still want to squeeze in a quote here, so I grabbed this craft sticky notes and on one of the small blank craft paper, I wrote the quote that says, "Some beautiful paths can be discovered without getting lost." It might look weird to some of you gluing it in a different direction, but anyway, I just added the same border and we are finally finished with my June cover spread. Now let's move on to creating a spread for my goals and focus. And before we do the layout, let's paint this horizontal illustration first. To be able to execute this painting, I had to go out and take a panoramic picture from the inside of our car. Then I also wanted to paint a girl looking at the view. I've had this scene idea to paint when I was still brainstorming for this theme, and this is also a reason why I decided to move the calendar next to my cover so that I'll have more spaces to write my focus and goals. I started working with the inside of the car first. My main used colors were just white and black. There are also parts that are gray. I'll just mix both colors and create the intensity based on my reference. Then we'll move to painting the girl. She's wearing a yellow hoodie and denim pants. Her hand is slightly resting outside the open window. I just painted a yellow color block again for the hoodie and blue for the pants and dark brown for the hair. Then we will work on the folds of the clothing with a darker tone. It might seem a little difficult at first, but I just took my time and slowly built it up. I challenged myself this time of what I should paint for the landscape without a reference photo, but with memory instead. I travel a lot by the road, especially during college days and family trips. It's usually a 10 to 12 hour ride. I sleep most of the time though, but when I'm awake, I love looking at the mountains and hills. So I painted the sky or the sunset. I'll emphasize that later on. And then multiple layers of green hills. I didn't think too much about the shapes. On the left hand side, I am painting a couple of palm trees. I just did the same technique with the trees we painted from the cover page. I moved on to painting this part of the windshield. It is the tinted part, I think. Then I worked on the rear view and the side mirror, as well as the reflections. I went back to add more yellow to the sunset and the small details of the hills. When I was done, I removed the washi tapes and covered some paints that slipped through with white paint pen. Now let's move on to the focus and goals layout. I actually got this layout idea from Anna of Journal Away, and I thought it was perfect for the illustration as well. So I wrote the titles first, and then I'm dedicating 3 spaces for each. I took my small flat brush to paint some square backgrounds using the colors I used for my paintings. This is supposed to have summery vibes, but I think the colors turned out autumnal. But yeah, I grabbed some craft sticky notes again and glued them on the focus section. For the goals, I just divided them into 2, where I will write the goal and the corresponding actions to be taken. Lastly, I added some brown grid washi tapes on both sides of the spread because they also look kinda empty here. But after that, we are finished with this focus and goals spread. Next, we are going to set up my habit trackers. In the past few months, I've been enjoying creating interactive habit trackers, and a lot of you seem to enjoy it too. I would love to do the same for June, but I had to do something really quick since I needed to prepare for our trip. So I took some more blank craft sticky notes, and this is where I will draw round shapes for each habit tracker. I'm using this sticky stencil from Notebook Therapy to draw the round shapes as always. The spaces were too tight here, and I hope there were some allowance or the craft paper were a little bit bigger, but let's just leave it like that. I guess this is the only wellness tracker that is always present in my monthly spreads, and lately I started to write out some affirmations, highlights, and what I'm grateful for in this gratitude page. I used to track my moods before, but I find it a bit difficult to keep up the last time I was using it. But I also sometimes track my sleep, and I think I will also include a period tracker in my next bullet journal since it's already back after my pregnancy. And speaking of my next bullet journal, I will be setting up a new one since I only have a few pages left on this notebook. And I hope you look forward to the video next month. Back to the spread, I am painting another illustration under the habit trackers. I started with this classic Volkswagen red 1967 micro bus. We are also going a little bit retro here. I also wanted something easier to paint this time since I knew the first two paintings are going to take a lot of time. The micro bus is indeed very easy to paint since the design is quite simple and it doesn't have a lot of details to work on. So I just followed my reference photo for this. Nowadays, I try not to copy everything in a photo and just take some elements from several photos until I find the ones that are almost, if not perfectly, visualize the picture I have in mind or imagination. And thanks to the people I follow that encourage aspiring artists to gather reference photos from websites or platforms like Unsplash or FreePic that offer copyright-free photos. Or if a photo you find is not copyright-free, like the ones we often see from Pinterest, I know the photos there are pretty, but it's better to ask for the owner's permission. I painted the road with the same color we used previously, and then I'm going to add some greeneries on both sides, one that is on the front, covering the left side of the bus, and the other side behind. I am painting various leaves on the left and more in shape and bigger instead of just doing the tapping technique to make this illustration more interesting and tropical looking. To be honest, I struggled a bit on how I should arrange the leaves, so it looked weird at first and I had to add white paint for the base of each leaf after realizing they don't look vibrant. But I added a couple more green layers and the details using my detailed brush. At the back, I also painted coconut trees. I interchange it sometimes with palm trees, but they're on the same family anyway. I was thinking if I should paint the sky, but I decided to keep it this way, and that completes this painting and this whole habit trackers and gratitude journal spread. I'm leaving one spread blank here to create a memory spread from my trip. I don't have any layout in mind at this point, so let's flip over and start making our content-related pages. On the left page is for some to-do list or tasks I need to do for content creation, such as filming, editing, and more. Below will be for my social media trackers, where I keep track of the growth of my YouTube channel, Instagram, and TikTok from start to the end of the month. I moved on to the right of the spread to draw my content planner. This time I'm making a bigger calendar for it. After that, I decided to cut out a few spaces around it so it becomes a Dutch door. And I'm also attaching a grid washi tape for a little decoration. Flipping through the other side, let's set up this playlist page first before we dive into the illustrations of these pages. I'm finally adding some more songs to this page than I usually do. Again, I like to keep this layout really simple. I used the same craft sticky notes for the backgrounds of the songs. I also took some with grid patterns to have a little variation to the design. I just wrote the songs off camera and here they are. Now let's paint the illustration on the to-do and socials tracker page. And this is a stacked vintage suitcases. This design element suits every travel theme you might want to do later on. The colors I chose for the suitcases are again very autumnal. I don't know if it's just me. This was pretty fast to paint, by the way, and when I removed the washi tapes, I realized I should have painted the bottom fully so it doesn't look that sharp. But I just finished this page by drawing a box on the to-do section using the same yellow Tombo's fine tip to separate it from the socials tracker. Next, we are painting the playlist illustration. This idea came first to my mind, and it's probably one of the best ways to illustrate jamming with music on a road trip, in my opinion. So this is an image of a car music player. But first, we are painting the view that is seen through the windshield. It's a simple painting of a blue sky, mountains, grass field, and the road, of course. I painted the first layers, which are just blocks of colors, and while I wait for it to dry, I moved on with the inside of the car. As you can see, I painted the rear view with some accessories hanging on it. I have a little bit of a childhood story about traveling by the road. I used to hate it so much because I suffer from travel sickness really bad, so I don't really get to enjoy the trips. It's like my soul leaving my body. I know it sounds exaggerated, but it's true. Some of the things that trigger my sickness are air fresheners and the smell of the inside of the car. At the time, pine tree air fresheners are used by many vehicles, so before I get inside the car or bus, I'll peek inside first to see if there are air fresheners so I can ask my mom to tell the driver to remove it. And sometimes I'll be really stubborn to open the windows if the scent is still there. My experiences back then were just so awful, but when I got older, I'm grateful that my body started to get used to it, and now I get to enjoy road trips without feeling sick. Okay, enough with that. I hope you didn't feel uncomfortable with the story. So here I painted figures of a passenger and a driver, the music player on the center, and some snacks. Potato chips are my comfort food, by the way, and there are also some beverages such as canned soda and fruit juice. When I was almost done with the painting, I noticed the steering wheel was too small, and in this perspective, I think the driver's seat could be showing as well. I get pretty critical with my work sometimes, but anyway, that's our playlist illustration, and I still like the end result. Let's move on to the final pages of my June bullet journal spreads, and these are my weeklies. I went for horizontal Dutch doors this month. I already cut them out of camera, and then I'm going to do the layouts first. I chose to do this very minimal look. I also made colored squares for the dates background and just wrote the days beside them. I did the same thing for the other 4 Dutch door pages, and then let's proceed with this bigger or the biggest painting in this whole setup. I painted a sunset sky again, and this time I wanted to include more colors like a bit of purples and reds. I didn't manage to blend the transition of blue and purple well here, and I just noticed it when I removed the washi tapes in the end. The scene I'm painting here is a hillside road by the ocean. I painted the road similar to the colors we used from our previous paintings, and then the hillside. This turned out to be a rocky hillside. I painted big rocks and it gets smaller farther away. I used a light shade of brown for the base layer and then added dark brown for the shadows from the left to bottom part of the rocks. The same thing with the greenery on top of them, but I did the opposite here where I painted the shadows first, which is dark green, and added the highlights with tapping movements. This might be confusing, but I chose this way since I don't need to build up the rocks further here, unlike the greenery where I like to create texture with this technique. But anyhow, you can always go for whichever technique you're comfortable with. In between, I also painted some palm trees to still somehow bring the tropical vibe in this painting. I almost forgot to paint the clouds here, so I painted a cloud shape with white and a hint of yellow. Then I'm going to create layers by outlining them with yellow and add some more shadows in between. Moving on to the road itself, I painted the white markings and the railings on the right. Now let's paint the main subject of this painting. We're painting a convertible car. I used gray, brown, and yellow for the colors of the car, but I wish I used something more eye-catching like red maybe, since we already have these colors in the background. Then there are two girls. I painted their hair the same way, and there are also strands, flying since it's a windy scene. I just completed the details in their arms and added some more fine lines using my black pen, and we are finally finished with this painting and this whole setup. Let's have a quick reverse flip through of all the spreads we did for my June 2022 bullet journal setup. It was nice doing something of an adventure again this time, and creating this made me feel excited for my trip. So that is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing to the channel and join our growing community. Thank you so much for joining me in this June Plan With Me video, and I will see you really soon in my next one. Bye!